This lovely little plant is one of the best succulents for beginners. This is Haworthia fasciata, also known as zebra plant. Now, zebra plant is such a fun succulent. It's really tolerant of people who don't like to water succulents, but it's actually also pretty tolerant of having a lot of care and being given a decent amount of water. So let's talk about how to actually care for this plant. So zebra plant, you'll see has these nice white stripes on the dark green leaves, obviously where it gets its name zebra from. It's actually commonly confused with another Haworthia called Haworthia attenuata, and the only difference between the two is that attenuata has stripes on the inside of the leaves, whereas fasciata, which we're talking about today, has stripes only on the outside. So attenuata has inside and outside stripes. Fasciata only has stripes on the outside. So that's how you can tell the two apart. Now, this plant does not like full sun like most succulents. It can have full sun maybe for an hour or two in the morning, but for the most part, it wants to be in really bright shade. Definitely in the late afternoon when temperatures get hot, you want to make sure it's fully shaded. You can actually see the difference between these two plants. This one has had actually more sun and a little bit too much sun. So you can see how it's starting to turn kind of reddish here along the bottom, whereas this one is a nice deep green because it's had the perfect amount of sunlight. This one is also starting to lighten a little bit because it's getting too much sun. So you can just see the difference there. And this is all based on the amount of sunlight that they're getting. Now, you'll also want to know that this is a zone 10 plant, which means it can handle temperatures down to 30 degrees. However, as with all zone temperature ratings, you want to keep your succulent out of that coldest temperature as much as possible. So if you're growing this outdoors and you know that you're going to have even 2 or 3 nights of frost and temperatures below 32 degrees, you want to make sure that you cover it with frost cloth or bring it inside. This will not tolerate weeks at a time of temperatures of 30 degrees, but it can handle a couple nights. But it's definitely not a cold hardy plant. You're not going to be able to grow this outdoors in a true 4-season climate. The great thing about zebra plant is it loves to propagate on its own. And the way that it does that is just by putting off offsets or chicks. So you can't probably see this very well here, but there's a little baby hanging off to the side of this plant. It's just about an inch or so in size. Once this gets to be a little bit bigger, say about 2 or 3 inches, where it just seems like a little bit more established plant, you can go ahead and break that off, try and keep some of the original roots with it, and then plant it up in its own pot. And it generally produces quite a few pups or chicks throughout generally during the fall and spring. So this is considered to be a winter grower or a summer dormant plant. Again, because it doesn't love the bright sun, it also doesn't love a lot of heat. So it will grow best in the spring and fall when the temperatures are really mild, and it will usually bloom. It has a nice just white little flower that comes off, and otherwise, it's just going to be growing and pupping generally in the spring. Another thing to know about Haworthia fasciata is it can actually be grown indoors, which is one of the reasons why I feel like it's one of the best succulents for beginners. Without a grow light, as long as this is by a bright window, you're usually going to see fairly normal growth with it. Let's talk about watering. So with all succulents, I recommend that you use the soak and dry method, meaning that you soak the soil completely and you don't water again until the soil is completely dry. And zebra plant is no exception to that. However, it is one that can tolerate some neglect and some extra love, as you might call it. So when it gets a little bit more frequent watering, it will grow bigger a little faster. If it's not getting a lot of water, it's going to stay about the same size. And if you're growing it indoors, I recommend keeping your watering to a minimum so that it doesn't grow as fast and it's less likely to stretch out if it's not getting enough light. Now it'll grow to be about 6 to 8 inches in height and about 6 to 8 inches in width. So it's not an especially large succulent. I wanted to show you here too, you can see that there are a few little leaves that are turning kind of, they're actually dry and yellowish. And then you can see some of the tips are dried out as well. The dried out tips is a fairly normal thing for zebra plant. It can be from a little bit, from being underwatered a little bit. The yellowing at the bottom, in this case where it's dried out and it's crispy, that is a sign that it needs more water. If it's yellow and it's translucent and soggy, or if you start to see any sort of blackening or it looks mushy, that's a sign it's getting too much water and you need to let it dry out before you water again. So it's a great plant for beginners. It kind of tells you what it needs by its leaves. If they start to feel limp, then go ahead and give it a little bit more water. If you see that it's starting to get a little bit mushy, let it dry out before you water again. Zebra plant is an awesome plant. It's a really great succulent to start with, and I would love to know if you have grown these in your house or if you're growing them outside. Just leave a comment below and share your experience with me. And as always, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, hit subscribe, and share it with all of your succulent loving friends, and I'll see you next time.